Good evening and welcome to The Big Picture. Tonight in Directions, we look at the influence of Western Australia's vast size on its cultural and economic history in Bigger Than Texas.
For me, the first thing I think of in Western Australia is landscape. And when I grew up, I didn't see people as the immediate things that are around me. I saw landscape. So it's like it's a state where landscape is overpowering and people are secondary in a way.
Well, I think the flat topography tends to encourage people into grandiose ideas because it makes them think their possibilities are limitless. And I think maybe the topography here encourages this sort of fairly uncurbed individualism, which is rather dangerous.
There was this picture built up that you had to actually treat the environment as a very hostile thing. And if it was there, you chopped it down. If it was in the ground, you dug it up. And that was the state of Western Australia.
This is a story of human endeavour in Western Australia. Covering 1/3 of the Australian continent, this vast state, as big as India, half the size of Europe, is a land of striking contrast, enormous mineral wealth, boundless opportunity. More than anything, it is a reminder that even though man is beginning to probe the limits of space, there are still frontiers to conquer here on Earth.
David, it's Rose. We had to put Dad into hospital today. It'd be good if you could get over here as soon as you could. I'll keep you posted. Bye.
It was during the making of this film that my father became very ill. My sister had run. Travelling across Australia from Perth to Canberra, I could feel the distance between us. I began to realise that this film was not just about Western Australia, but also about the place it took in my life. My decision to live 3,000 kilometres from my family was perhaps about my relationship with my father. For me, any exploration of Western Australia had become in some way an exploration of our relationship. I took this picture 2 weeks before he died. My Western Australian story begins in 1961. In that year, Mum, Dad, my brother Ian and my sister Rosalind and me, Davy Crockett, we left Australia on our way to England, back to the mother country for 2 years. In those days, passenger ships on their way to England would stop off at Western Australia before setting sail for deepest, darkest Africa.
The first assault on the new frontier was made here in 1829. This is Fremantle, Australia's western gateway. Through this gateway came the British pioneers and others who followed them from many lands. From this point, they set out to penetrate the western hinterland. Farmers, foresters, gold miners, and a host of others seeking a new life in a new country.
Western Australia was a place far, far away, as good as another country. And it's this view which I remember when I think back to that one day I spent in Perth. 16 years later, as an adult, I moved to this place in which I had dreamed of one day living. This far-off fantasy land. What was it about Western Australia which had attracted me all those years ago? What was it about this place so far away, but still within the same country? Looking out on this view, it's as if I'd claimed it for my own. And perhaps, like the colonists before me, I made it mine.
That's in 1827. Now, the governor in Sydney, his name was Governor Darling, he decided to send Captain Sterling in one ship, named the Success, to explore the Swan River area. All right? Now, Captain Sterling gave a very good report of the Swan River. He recommended the area as being quite suitable for settlement.
Sail forth, Challenger, to that southward land beyond, where Fremantle plans to claim the west from the mouth of the River Swan. A camp is made and a flag is raised on the second day in May, and history is recorded there on that beach at Bathurst Bay, southward bound to that barren sandy shore, where a hardy band of colonists will remain forevermore. Swan River grants will flourish and the hills will open wide as lonely men and women.
We decided that this was the best location to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the birth of James Sterling. I'm sure that when Anne and Andrew Sterling looked down on their newborn baby on the 28th of January in 1791, they had little thought of the ceremony that would take place here today.
Sail on, Cynthia, to beneath the Southern Cross.
Well, it's where it all began, and it reminds us of the fantasy beginnings, these ships tipping people off onto the shore after, 9 months or so on the high seas, and suddenly arriving, what did they arrive at? They arrived with sand. Some of the children on some of the first arrivals thought that it was snow. And there's a sense, I suppose, in which we've remained clinging to the beach, metaphorically.
You almost get the feeling of a picnic spot by the river. You get people suddenly arriving and setting up their little stoves and tents and things and enjoying it. But not one of them has really got any sense as to of place as to why they're there or anything about it. In other words, it's a great little spot to be in, but to some degree it tends not to go deeper than that.
The first settlers were intensely genteel, wanting to replicate England. There's one of the first settlers who writes home, she must have been just living in a bush humpy. She says, it's just like home. She even has a coal fire.
Arriving back in Canberra, I find the family slides. I look on the saved images of our family's past, looking for information, trying to understand our family, and perhaps how geography plays a part. This is my brother Ian. He lives in Singapore. This is my sister Rosalind. She lives in Canberra. I'm the youngest. We grew up in the 50s and 60s, a post-war happy family. When I was 10, my father and I would play chess. Sometimes one game would go on for days. He would usually win. As the years went by, I started to win. I can't remember whether he just didn't have the time or whether he didn't want to play, but suddenly the games just stopped. I can't remember us being close again after this. Suddenly, something had changed, and I was 12.
And making a stand for the colony's spirit, motivation, enterprise, determination and accomplishment. Or in a reverse reaction, you could push him off this pedestal, debug his reputation and belittle his place in our Western Australian culture. Or again, adopting a third analytic.
Sterling ordered the massacre of Aborigines at Pinjarra. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre of women and children ordered by this butcher here.
They had celebrated places like things like Waterloo Day and Oak Apple Day, but Stirling wanted one of his own colony. And so we have Foundation Day to this day. And he made sure...
People that's sitting there, you've all got skeletons in your closet. You know what force you use on Aboriginal people? You all remember Native Welfare Day?
The first free settlement in Australia. To 1829, every other settlement had begun with the convicts.
They're guilty.
The Swan River was a colony of free men and free women. And Stirling's successful settlement made certain that the British way of life is the way of life which you and I enjoy today.
The philosophy of James Stirling and the social elite that followed him firmly believed in the creation of a colonial aristocracy, a West Australian nobility. Privileged landowners, masters of vast estates, kept running by a pool of contented servants. The colony had been founded not with any glowing ideals for the betterment of mankind, but on selfishness and greed.
We decided to do Land Looking West because there was no visual depiction of West Australian history, and a lot of people thought, in effect, we didn't have one. When we started to research it, we realised that perhaps the reason it hadn't been done before was the fact that the history is totally unlike any other history. The colony started on the basis of an advertising campaign. The first governor, who had explored the place a few years before, went back to England, promoted it, formed a company, got himself appointed as the governor, convinced people to come out here to a land which the publicity said was verdant countryside, touched by summer rains that settle like mist.
The course of the stream was very tortuous, and its mouth was almost blocked up by sandhills. The valley itself was both picturesque and fertile, and the appearance of the country to the east and northeast was highly promising. The stream I called the Bows. This spot was a favourite halting place of the natives, and from the number of huts and other indications which we saw, the district must be very densely populated. I continued a course of 180 degrees up a steep limestone range, behind which apparently ran a branch of the watercourse we had just passed. A good country lay to the eastward of us. This is an extract from the journal of Sir George Grey, who was standing in the very spot where I'm standing in 1840. And this gives me a real buzz to be actually standing where Sir George Grey stood while thinking about how he was going to promote this rather desolate landscape for people back home in the mother country. Because what he's doing is turning it into instant real estate, and that's partly to package it as a commodity so that colonists will come out here, which in fact they did. But partly it's positioning himself in a landscape as one which he belongs to and which belongs to him. And that's an effect which works for me too. In a sense, I can possess this land which otherwise I feel so alienated from.
My father was a geologist and would go away into the bush for long periods of time. He was an explorer of the Jurassic Age, looking for minerals that would make these desolate places places of value. We would sit around the slide projector and watch as he would tell us about his travels. And like a radio play, I would imagine his adventures. Lost in the desert, cooking up a feed, bogged in dust like quicksand. I remember this particular slide. I would paint this picture at school.
I think the visual arts in Western Australia have certainly been used to reinforce in the public's mind their sense of place, where they belong, what they do, and how they perceive themselves in the society. And so landscape has played a very critical role in the formation of Western Australian cultural identity. The artists have usually painted the landscape as very prosperous, offering a very bright future for settlers and inhabitants of the state. The landscape is not depicted as showing any effects of wars or depressions or internal conflicts. So it's a very conservative and maybe a very romantic view of Western Australia as it has existed.
A slab of limestone, 400 miles long, bigger than the state of Victoria. A treeless plain, the Nullarbor, dividing east from west.
Because it's so isolated, people need to be reassured that it really is important, that it really does matter. And this view showed that it was cultivated, civilized. It looked like parkland, a word that they use again and again and again, because it's like the park of the English gentry. Trees fairly well spaced with shrubbery underneath and so on. And it was an outpost of British order. Very often they had the statue of Queen Victoria in the foreground or something like that too, to show that it was one of the jewels, perhaps not the jewel, but one of the lesser jewels at any rate in the crown.
My mother was always protective of my father. He had nightmares about the war. We were never meant to know. I discovered from my sister that my mother had lost twins when she was 6 months pregnant. Like a television family of the 50s, we didn't talk about unpleasant things. I now have a feeling that the silence of the family covered resentment and hurt. In 1975, after a 5-year battle with cancer, my mother died. 2 months later, I drove those 3,000 kilometres to Western Australia. I moved to this fantasy land I had known 16 years before. Was I escaping from my mother's death, or was I leaving my father behind?
We had a country which was, or a small colony, that was perched on the edge of a very dry continent and was isolated from the rest of the world and the rest of Australia. Now we have an integrated economy in which Australia now fits into an international economy, and Western Australia, as part of that national economy, is enmeshed, but only partially so, and still carries with it the legacy of having been isolated in the past, and some of, if we can call it, almost the social baggage or the intellectual baggage of having been isolated. So what we have is a state where there's almost an ethic of the rest of the country being, not really being part of it. And I think that's really summed up in the phrase that I noticed when I first got here, that the eastern states are referred to singularly as over east, and almost dismissively so.
How do you view yourself in Western Australia? How do you view our state, once the great business state of Australia? Our sportsmen and women, do they win like they used to? What about the weather that kept most of us here? And the
I just lie awake shuddering sometimes when I think about Western Australia, when the attitudes that seem to be prevalent. I think we have what someone described as not so much cultural cringe as continental cringe. You know, we're on the wrong side, and Western Australia's always developed in that sense of being too late, having come later, having been like 2,000 miles from the action. We're on the wrong ocean. You know, nothing ever went the right way, and so we had to try so hard to catch up and to be grown up, and Perth had to try so hard to be a city. You know, it was almost embarrassing.
The America's Cup.
They say we never do it, but we from the north to the west, and that's where it belongs.
Waiting for them was perhaps the biggest post-war crowd Perth has seen. Two of their heroes, Alan Bond and Ben Lexon, carried the prize, which will be responsible for reshaping WA over the next few years.
I know the people of the world are watching.
There was an enormous amount of hype that came with the Cup and with the winning of the Cup, and people were terribly, terribly excited about it. In the end, of course, it didn't have the dramatic economic effect that people expected, because they had all sorts of unreal expectations about what the America's Cup was.
The guest of honour was removed gingerly from her armoured limousine, while the masses waited expectantly upstairs. One wonders if...
On the other hand, they still had in their memories, if you like, the moment of glory and the idea that Perth was finally on the map, that people were really paying attention to Perth. And that's a very big pull for people in Western Australia. They never feel as if they're treated quite seriously enough.
And hot off the press...
When Bond became a national hero in 1983 and he won the America's Cup, bankers throughout the world were keen to lend him as much money as he wanted to take. And he did take a vast amount of money. He had been told so many times that he'd got it wrong, and he'd proved to people so many times that he was right, that he thought he could walk on water, and he could get away with anything. As it has turned out, he hasn't. As to what drives the man, I think your guess is probably as good as mine. He had an incredible desire to be better, to show the world. He had something to prove. I guess he had a chip on his shoulder, or maybe a forest on his shoulder, but he was determined to come out on top. Money was the way in which he chose to do it. I don't think money was really what drove him on. I think it was a desire to show people.
Essentially, Western Australia must have been the last frontier for the continent, and frontiers naturally produce characters who are larger than life and who are willing to take risks, and in this area, Alan Bond must reign supreme.
I think he's done the good things for Western Australia, so some of the things are coming out now that seem to be a bit questionable, but I think overall he's put Western Australia on the map.
But the Australian market certainly firmer this morning, with the All Ords gaining 20 points.
This is how I remember my father, always with the news or the stock exchange in the background. Now his body seems to show all the signs of a past life, twisted with arthritis. I find massaging his arms gives him some relief. It's a way I can make contact. I ask questions about our family. Were we really that happy family? I feel that things were never talked about. Life went on, but the children were never included in this happy family. Tensions were tolerated. My father finds it as hard as I. He is surprised that I want to know about the past, and he is surprised that I feel the family never talked. We didn't talk about my mother's death. I feel a little guilty now. It's as if I've called him a failure. I can't see another way of asking these questions. I look back on those images of his past.
More than 1 million acres of new country is being turned into farms every year. Much of the land was useless sand plain, now made fertile by science and mechanization. Ships carrying 65,000 tons are already taking iron ore to markets in Japan. Much bigger ships are expected in the years ahead as the mineral frontiers of the West produce a rising tide of wealth. Already there is iron, oil, nickel, bauxite.
It's always been a kind of a mining resource-based economy, and that has certain results. And one of them is that the whole economy here has tended to have a kind of a speculative edge to it. It's not just what we've seen in the 1980s or even the 1960s. I'm talking about the last century as well. And so therefore you have an up and down type of economy.
Migration was seen in two contexts. One was bringing people in to lift the population. The second was to bring in entrepreneurs or to form companies or ideas to develop the resource that was here.
So we now have a state economy based on agriculture and mining primarily, but the mining industry isn't controlled from Western Australia. It's actually controlled primarily from the headquarters of companies on Collins Street in Melbourne. So now we have a tension between Western Australia trying to perform and to look after its own economy, but not being in complete control. So it's only partially in control. And I think that creates an element of frustration.
Why is the Premier moving as she is to clearly ease the path for those mining companies?
Oh, I think she's wanting to send a signal to the mining industry and to international developers and investors that West Australia's national parks and nature reserves, and in fact the whole state, is basically open slather for them.
Now, in that context, is Western Australia really in command of its own destiny? Or is it simply saying, or are other people dictating the terms on which Western Australia is integrated into the rest of Australia and the rest of the global economy? That, you know, we're only wanted for one thing.
We can build a better future. It's gonna take a lot of work. We can build it up together best by backing Brian Burke.
Governments in Western Australia have always had a tradition of attempting to lure big projects to the state, big resources project, partly because of the way the economy is structured, and that often means some government involvement. But Brian Burke, when he took office in 1983, really developed this into a whole new ethos.
What we need are some fresh, new ideas.
There was a great resentment by people in the Labor government, and personified by Brian Burke, that Melbourne and Sydney had left Perth out.
Growth, homegrown economic growth. That's how Labor's going to protect your jobs and create new ones. But to make sure this growth results in real prosperity, we've got to make sure local businesses get a lot more opportunity and not rely too heavily on foreign investment. My government's going to establish the Western Australian Development Bank to channel Western Australian money into Western Australian companies.
Let's back Brian Burke.
And so there began this partnership with a few members of the local business community, who quickly, of course, became bigger and bigger. And that was that there would be various projects which the government could help and support, and that these entrepreneurs could become involved in, and that everybody would win. But of course, it quickly became tainted.
The events this afternoon have taken both sides of the parliament.
Now allegations of corruption involving political
Whoever's been involved, they should be exposed if those affairs are either illegal or deny the material,
Suggestions of cronyism, of favouritism, of suggestions and suspicions that certain things were being done behind closed doors that shouldn't be done, and that some people were getting rich and other people were being left out in the cold.
For the sake of our investigation, very serious ones these.
Eventually, Carmen Lawrence, as the new Premier, felt that she had no choice but to call a Royal Commission into what had become known by then by everybody as WA Inc.
Alan Bond was a man of his times. And our times were a corrupt society where money was everything. Snobbery, the Moet champagne, the convicts suddenly thought they were on the French Riviera. Criticised. And that's why we succumbed, because the media told us. Suddenly we were swingers.
But we're kind of stumbling over ourselves to be grown up and to be sophisticated, which is probably where it came to the head in the 80s with that kind of orgy of self-congratulation and entrepreneurial bulldust that went on, where we were in such a hurry to grow up and to be big and impressive that we cut all the corners. Where there was no sense of ethic, no sense of structure, no sense of culture. You just go for it. Tell a few lies, steal a few bits and pieces, put the wool over everyone's eyes, and it'll be right on the night. But you can't build a culture over a crust of spaces like that. It's just a honeycomb, just going to fall in.
All right, now we need to go and look at the memorial. The Darling is the first one. This is the map he made of the city of Perth. Can you find anything that might be Eliza?
There's Eliza. Eliza.
Darling. Well, the Darling Ranges, of course, are named after Governor Darling.
James
Sterling, yes, there's two you found.
The monuments and statues in Western Australia aren't to artists or writers or painters or anything that's cultural. The statues are to people who've succeeded economically. The prime statue in the centre of Perth is Alexander Forrest, one of the early entrepreneurs. The monuments in Perth really tell a lot, I think, about the place and the people.
Well, let me say a few things about Kings Park. First of all, it's one of the sacred sites of our society. There's no other city in Australia that has so many of its monuments in one place. All the major monuments, almost, are here in Kings Park.
The thing about Western Australia is that when you have visitors, you tend to show them the sights of the city as though they are the only thing we have to offer. Invariably, you're taken up to Kings Park as though that is the central focus of Perth.
Right.
It's certainly deeply etched in the psyche of Western Australians.
Okay, it's a sacred site. Now, why was the site of Perth chosen? I could talk about that for a very long time, but undoubtedly one of the major reasons was that it conformed exactly with the 18th century concept of the picturesque. And this, above all, was the view from Kings Park. And this was a view that was painted, photographed, almost from the identical point, again and again and again and again.
A lot of these paintings were in fact sent back to family in England to show them the sort of environment and towns that the settlers were living in, because of course there was no photography at this stage in Australia. But they're also an affirmation of the settlers being in Western Australia, conquering the land, and it's saying we're going to stay here. There's no way that we're going to be pushed out of this environment.
Just one boat, and he camped down at the bottom of Mount Eliza, but he was wondering what he could see, so he climbed up the hill and looked out at the view over there, and what did he see in the distance? What was it in the distance?
Ranges and hills?
Yes, so he was really the very first person to ever see the view that you're seeing now. And that would have been quite exciting, wouldn't it? To think that you were the first person to ever have seen that view.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Rachel Blythe to come forward to place a floral tribute at the statue of James Stirling. Would you welcome Rachel Blythe, please?
The act of murder. Witness with you with the murderer. Pay tribute. Paint him wide, at least. You paint him wide. Take him away. Take him away and melt him down. Take this murderer out of town. Just leaning down. That's right. Back. That's great. A little bit of a smile. Yep. Take away.
Give me that kind of placard. You bring that here.
I just want to
You got no right to do that.
I appreciate
You bring our property back.
joining the celebration.
I'd like our property back if you don't mind. I want our property back.
State of Western
Stole
Australia.
our
Come on.
Don't start killing our everything else. You stole our children too.
Hey, you shot our children. We want our property back.
Come on, tell some lies, Dad. Tell more stories.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll now ask Carmel Charlton to sing a second bracket of
You're not
numbers.
dealing with
He's
drunken
to the west.
Aboriginal. These are sober Aboriginal.
Take this murderer out of town.
Actually, I think what we'll do is we'll go in for morning tea.
Take him away. Melt him down. Take his murderer.
Yeah, well, look. I don't interfere. I don't talk to people who...
Put your hands on him, you'll be
God,
assaulted.
you're
You understand how we feel too?
We feel very strongly.
Well, I don't see why you have to celebrate it like this. Go and celebrate it privately, you know, because every time that you do something like this and we are around, we will remind white people of what they've done to our people, and it's never been made right yet, you see.
I think we must accept that it was a terrible thing that happened.
Yeah, but it's not something to be celebrated then. Yeah, well that's nice, thank you, but it's nothing for us to celebrate, and it shouldn't be for you to either, really, you know, because you never...
He's my ancestor, I can't move away from him.
With only the shallow breathing of my father in the background, I look around the family home. I find letters from the past, mention of an old love affair, and conflicts, all with their repercussions in the present. I want to hear his truth to these stories.
There were hidden sort of psychological elements that had developed in our character and probably exist even today, The strongest one was our relationship with the Aborigines. The early settlers hadn't really come to terms with their arrival and the place that the Aboriginal people took in that arrival. It was almost as though the Aboriginal people were cardboard cutouts standing along the banks of the Swan River. You actually sailed past them and walked past them, and you know they were part of the picture, but they had no identity or character of their own. There were a few isolated individuals who did recognise there was going to be a problem.
You know, young man, what
don't worry, look, we know.
Obviously not much. And nothing said about it. But thank you anyway. Thank you.
I hope you agree with me in making the decision to come inside, because it was just impossible at that point, and we're not going to be beaten today. We're going to ask Charles Eaton Clark to tell us a story about it.
Rich golden wheat and bushland range, you'll always be part of me. And here's to the West and the brave pioneers who fought through the desert, the sand and the tears, and all those who live in the days gone before, the proud ancient tribe, the dream
Three boys crackled past on trail bikes, long blonde hair waving in the wind. Speedboats erupted power with lesser craft surged along behind. The breeze rustled a patch of bull oak, reminding me of swan, bittern, wild duck winging, now all alien to the river. Sir John Forrest stands tall and stone in St George's Terrace, gun across shoulder, symbolic of what had removed the river's first children. And the other river, the Murray, where Western Australia's first mass murderer, Captain Stirling, trapping, thrashing rode gaily at the head of 24 men. For an hour they fired and bodies black, mutilated, floated down the blood-stained stream. So now that the banners have fluttered, the eulogies ended, and the tatters have rendered the rattle of spears, look back and remember the end of December and 150 years.
Fremantle Jail. Yeah, it's good to close a jail. I have something against jails. I'd like to close every bloody one of them. This closing ceremony is, for all of us, a catching up of our own history, our own roots as people who have worked, played, gone to school in the city of Fremantle. We have to accept that past of so many people dying in these wars, being alienated and isolated from their families, and we had the walls around to protect us. But it stamped something on us, our character. And I think the day that today we have to accept that with all its dark side. The death of so many Aboriginal people who were, because their land was stolen, they fought back and they were jailed.
You see on the right here we have the Swanberry site. It's a very sacred site here. This is where the people camped here. On the other side. We got arrested. There's two of our supporters over there.
You are now following the paths and the tracks of your ancestors, where they went down along this river to the roundhouse in Fremantle, and it was there that they was put on the boats and taken across the Rottnest Island, never to return back home to their families, their wives and their children. So you must think very hard and long, sitting down at the back there now, because we're going out there to try and find where the last remains of them are laying on that island. It's an important day for us.
When you approach the island, when you see it from the mainland, it's out there on the horizon, a kind of mirage, almost a fantasy land. When I first started coming to Rottnest as a boy and then as a teenager, I guess like most West Australians of my vintage, I saw the island in a simple and uncomplicated way.
You know, the house is built on top of the grave sites, roads built on top of the grave sites, people, you've got a tent city where people are living on top of the grave sites, and no respect is shown at all.
You can't remember. I can't remember my grandfather.
Just came down the lodge for a drink. I didn't realise there was anything going on.
My father's accent. And you claim that you can remember all the sacred sites. You're crazy.
Rotto's been my yearly holiday for many, many years, and we're not changing now.
But how long have you been coming here?
Oh, since I was in my early teens, in the old cottages we stay regularly.
How do you having a free day at Rottnest? You have to pay to come over on the boat?
You haven't paid your fucking rent yet. Guess what?
It cost me $26 to get here. It cost you $26 to get here today?
Why don't you go? What have you made out of this country?
Well, this is going too far, coming to Rottnest and having protests.
Crazy.
You have a guilt complex.
You're costing everybody a lot of money.
You have a guilt complex.
No. No, sorry. It's just not Rottnest.
Now that stick is left in the name of our ancestors. It was bought from the mainland, imprisoned here by the force and the power of the gun of the white man, the second race of people who embarked upon our foreshores of our mother the land. We, the first inhabitants. These people were taken from the mainland by force and brought here, never to return home back to their families. And we leave this here in remembrance of them. It's in the name of the crow, and the himiu, and the kangaroo, and the curlew, and all birds and all walks of life of animals. We leave this here. This is to protect the spirits.
My father slowly sinks. No one in the family seems to realise how sick he is. I know he's going to die soon. I stay with him. We talk a little more. It's like it's too hard to face. He doesn't want to talk anymore. I feel anger. I can see something of myself in him. He's going downhill fast. Soon he's back in the hospital, and now he's almost in a coma. It's a deep sleep. Moments of waking, small talk. How can you recount your life in a hospital bed? The doctors won't tell him he's going to die. They won't tell me that he's going to die. I know it's not long now. They only tell us when he has slipped too far from consciousness. They don't want us to share the knowledge of his death. They are as scared as everybody else. I know he had a lot to say, if only he could have found a voice. Before he died, he told me he'd done his best.
Years ago today, the colonists of Western Australia, virtually all of them of British origin, were celebrating the arrival and proclamation of their new constitution. By then, they numbered about 45,000, but they had no idea how many Aborigines lived here. What the settlers did know was that the state covered an area of 1 million square miles. They had a £45,600 opening credit balance, and the challenges and responsibilities before them were absolutely enormous.
We're going to take out a lot more ground than what they're offering us because we know, and a lot more other grave sites that need to be pegged out. We'll be asking people to move out of that quadrangle that they're living in at the moment. So we'll move forward and go up there and start where we start from behind the police station and peg from there.
Right. Okay, let's go. Which way? Yeah.
This morning, representatives of Parliament and supplementary staff planted 100 trees. At that event, I said that of all the things which had their beginning on the 21st of October 1890, my research revealed two outstanding survivors. One is the Moreton Bay fig tree planted by Governor Robinson in Fremantle, and the other is our Parliament. It seems to me symbolically significant that both stood off as a sturdy stave, and both put down deep roots in our state.
I'm sure you know how it's done, except that my colleague who's helped organise this, Ray Barrow, suggested I should indicate to those who don't that it's green up and brown down. But please have a look at the map and the names over there.
So we're going to start on that cement. I think you see it. Back in. No, a lot further up.
What he's all for him, eh?
Yeah, we need a shovel.
And we are pegging a burial site. The people that are camping in this area, you are camping on an Aboriginal burial site. And I am asking you, and we are asking you to leave it in that area and respect our tradition and our culture. Thank you.
Recorded for posterity, isn't it? Yes, I was looking to
So I would see today as a cleansing, a new future. But we cannot have a new future unless we accept the past, unless we acknowledge it, unless we embrace it and say, yes, that's the truth. No cover-up.
We were having breakfast when my father died. None of us were there with him. 3 days later, we held the funeral. As this generation of West Australians prepared to send off the ghosts of a colonial past, I could see the connection between my family and Western Australia. Within this place, there were many untold stories, dark secrets, and a kind of repression and denial one can remember from the family. Our history was not in the family slides. Like so many other post-war Australian families, we lived for a bright future, a future which couldn't include conflict or difference. Before he died, I told my father the things I'd felt about our family. We'd tried to be a Disney film. No conflicts, no dark secrets, and no unresolved problems. Even though confronted at every turn with a new version of history, there is still the temptation to bathe in a past which never existed. Like myself, this generation of West Australians is looking for a way to live within the shadow of the untold story of colonialism. Looking for ways to express our past, to come to grips with a new future, the creation of a new culture. Perhaps my fascination as a small boy with Western Australia was a way of expressing myself through geography. Like the colonists before me, I could be different in this place and take up a space in this most isolated of states. This place promoted as bigger than Texas.
Next Thursday, join us for your Christmas Eve viewing. Hyacinth Bouquet returns at 8:30 in a Keeping Up Appearances Christmas special, followed at 9 by the delightful Judy Garland musical Meet Me in St. Louis, next Thursday night, Christmas Eve on ABC. Stay with us now for Blackout, following ABC News Late Edition.
I'm Goodman. You?
For Benny Goodman, acknowledgement as a talented musician came easily, but his attempts to develop his own musical style initially met with resistance.
Anyone who can play as well as you devoting himself to that strange, unpopular, popular music, I don't understand it.
Steve Allen plays Goodman, and Goodman himself plays the clarinet in The Benny Goodman Story, 8:30 Friday, ABC.
If you enjoyed the great music on Symphony, then you'll love Encore. Over 5.5 hours of brilliant entertainment on 5 outstanding CDs. It's music for your every mood. Experience the styles and techniques of the masters. Vivaldi, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, Rossini, Puccini. They're all on Encore. This box set is an outstanding introduction to the world of the classics, and it's now available at your ABC shop, ABC Centre, and all good retailers.
It's make or break time for federal opposition leader John Hewson. As the polling gap widens between the coalition parties and the government, John Hewson unveils his Fight Back package Mark II. Join ABC for uninterrupted coverage from the National Press Club in Canberra, 1 o'clock next Friday. Handel's Messiah is the Sunday stereo special. Conducted by Sir Neville Mariner and performed by the orchestra and chorus of the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. Renowned international soloists are featured in this special 250th anniversary performance, which will be simulcast on ABC FM. Handel's Messiah, 8:30 Sunday, ABC.
Good evening, Michelle Tuahini with ABC Late Edition News. Heading the bulletin, British Airways wins the battle for a stake in Qantas. The federal government has decided to sell a 25% share of Australia's international flag carrier to British Airways. The price, $665 million. Finance Minister Ralph Willis said British Airways had emerged as the preferred buyer after detailed negotiations with that company and rival Singapore Airways. The deal offered Qantas what he described as significant strategic advantages. The remaining 75% will be sold by public float next year. Paul Keating has announced a major change to the Oath of Allegiance. The Prime Minister announced tonight that in future, people seeking to become Australian citizens will not be required to swear allegiance to the Queen.
The legislation proposes that in future, people seeking to become Australian citizens
will pledge or swear an oath in the following terms. From this time forward, or with an oath under God, I pledge my loyalty to Australia and its people, whose democratic beliefs I share, whose rights and liberties I respect, and whose laws I will uphold and obey.
John Hewson has confirmed that he'll scrap the GST on all food when he launches Fightback Mark II in Canberra tomorrow. The opposition leader has also revealed he'll speed up the sale of telecom to help pay for his big policy backflip, a move the Keating government brands catastrophic.
John Hewson's struggle to re-establish electoral support is centred on a drastic refashioning of his GST manifesto. The goods and services tax would come off all food at a cost of at least $4 billion, of childcare at a cost of $160 million. There'd be tax breaks for self-funded retirees, the cost at least $200 million. And the coalition is to scrap its policy to end the dole after 9 months. The price tag there, $745 million. To help pay for these and other increases in spending, the coalition looks set to defer its tax cuts for the wealthy. The telecom sale would also be accelerated, with the opposition hoping to raise $20 billion or more, all in the first term of a Hewson government.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Leo Macleay, has denied opposition claims that he ignored advice before a bicycle accident that led to him being paid compensation of $65,000. The opposition claimed Mr Macleay was told by staff at the Parliament Health Centre that a bicycle he wanted to use was unsuitable for him. The Speaker denied the claims and said legal advice was that there was no wrongdoing on his part. More rumblings at Westpac with the announcement that Managing Director Frank Conroy has resigned. His departure follows the appointment of Kerry Packer to the board.
The much-rumoured move comes just 10 days after Kerry Packer and his Consolidated Press manager Al Dunlap were invited onto the Westpac board. It's understood Frank Conroy had resisted Mr Packer's initial overtures to buy into the bank in September, and the two men held differing views on the pace and strategy of the bank's restructuring. Mr Conroy took over a year ago and has been directing a cost-cutting exercise following Westpac's record loss of $1.5 billion. Today's announcement from Chairman John Uhrig said it had been decided the leader of the bank's change program should come fresh to the task. Sources said this reflected a view that Frank Conroy could not implement the major surgery required at Westpac. Kerry Packer attended the meeting as an observer, pending his formal appointment to the board. A new managing director from outside the bank is expected to be named within the month. Mr Uhrig, who became chairman when several board members resigned in October, will serve as chief executive in the meantime.
On the stock market, Westpac shares went higher on the news, but slipped back later to be little changed on the day. The All Ordinaries Index put on just 2 points. The Australian dollar was a little stronger against the American dollar, a touch weaker on the trade-weighted index. The Federal Court has found the Tobacco Institute misled the public in an advertisement about passive smoking. The ad claimed there was little evidence which scientifically proved passive smoking could lead to disease. But as Michael Gleeson reports, the cigarette companies are also taking some comfort from the decision.
It's being heralded by anti-smokers as a decision for the nation's hearts and lungs.
This is a great victory for public health in Australia.
In question whether this ad was false and misleading. 2 years ago, the courts ruled it was. Today, a full bench of the Federal Court agreed. The Tobacco Institute ad published in 1986 said in part, there is little evidence and nothing which proves scientifically that cigarette smoke causes disease in non-smokers. In today's judgment, Justice Shepherd concluded the most likely reason for the publication of the advertisement was to promote or maintain sales of cigarettes.
We see this judgment as a legal affirmation of the link between passive smoking and several important major diseases.
Last year, Justice Morling slapped an injunction on the Tobacco Institute, preventing it from, among other things, publishing such ads again. But today the court reserved judgment on whether an injunction should be imposed, pending further hearings. A ray of hope for the cigarette companies.
the judgment handed down this morning is, in fact, a very significant victory for the Tobacco Institute.
The outcome sends confusing messages to both the pro and anti-tobacco lobby. While the court acknowledges a body of evidence linking cigarette smoke to diseases such as asthma and childhood respiratory problems, it stops short of repeating last year's finding that passive smoking causes lung cancer.
Captured Fretland leader Xanana Gusmao has appeared on Indonesian television calling for members of his group to surrender to the military. The appeal comes on the eve of international talks in New York on the future of the former Portuguese colony of East Timor.
It was Xanana Gusmao's third speaking appearance since he was captured by the Indonesian military nearly 4 weeks ago. His carefully worded statement in Portuguese was translated for Indonesian audiences. In it, he said the aspirations and hopes of the Fretland movement had failed, and he called on other members to give themselves up, promising that they would be well received, just as he had been. But Fretland's representative in Darwin says the speech is pure propaganda.
Again, Mr. Gusmao is under Indonesian custody, military custody. He's under arrest. And obviously he's been forced to make all these statements, although he says that he's doing it on his free will.
The United Nations is set to become involved in yet another peacekeeping operation, this time in Mozambique. About 8,000 troops and civilians will oversee a peace accord signed in Rome last October, ending the long-running war between the government and the rebels of the Mozambique National Resistance. The conflict so far has claimed more than 1 million lives. The operation is expected to cost more than $330 million. Khmer Rouge guerrillas have released 21 UN peacekeepers they took captive in central Cambodia. The group included 15 Indonesians, a Frenchman, an American and a Chinese. Japan's farm minister has rejected calls to open his country's rice market a day after 10,000 farmers demonstrated in Tokyo for continuation of the ban on rice imports. Agriculture Minister Masami Tanabe was quoted by officials as telling the European Community Commission that Japan could not accept lifting the ban. 8 months after winning the World Cup, Pakistan have turned in one of their worst ever one-day performances tonight in Sydney. They were humiliated by the West Indies, dismissed for 81. Phil Simmons had the outstanding figures of 4 for 3.
Patrick Patterson, returning to the West Indian side, opened the attack. First over, Raja on strike.
That's out for sure.
Getting cut and movement, the West Indians decimated the Pakistanis. Phil Simmons, the destroyer. First, Mushtabar.
And he's bowled him.
Then Sohail.
Oh, that's straight up in the air. This will be quartered it off. Yes, it will. No trouble at all.
Then Salim Malik, 4 for 9 in the 6th over.
Oh, that's in the air too. Oh, he's got him.
Captain Javed Miyandad came and went quickly. Another Simmons victim.
He's gone.
Kenny Benjamin claimed Akram after a great catch from Richie Richardson. It was simply a shambles. The Pakistan team sliding to a defeat, which will cause severe reverberations back in their homeland.
The United States Hubble telescope has taken pictures of the dusty birthplace of solar systems like our own in bright disks about 1,500 light years away from Earth. The pictures show the disks around 15 baby stars in the Orion Nebula, where many stars are born. Astronomers theorise that the dust contained within the disks eventually clot to make planets. C. Robert Odell, a scientist who's been involved with the Hubble telescope project since 1972, says the detailed images confirm more than a century of scientific explanation. Now, closer to home, a brief check of tomorrow's national weather. Some showers for Brisbane, Sydney, Canberra and Adelaide, and storms in Darwin, but fine in the other capital cities. That's ABC News to this minute. I'm Michelle Tuahini. Thank you for watching the National Late Edition, and we're back for you again tomorrow. But stay with us now for Blackout.
The banks have received from the third world debtor countries $250,000 every minute for 10 years.
Dr. Susan George has identified not only the cause of the third world's staggering $1 trillion debt, but its effect: poverty, malnutrition, child mortality, and more. Instability and destruction of the environment are now a reality. Robin Williams talks to Dr. Susan George on the Quantum Interviews, 10:40 Monday.
From everyone at the ABC, let me wish you a very merry festive season.